Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne, and today with my guest, Cathy Spaas. Cathy is a former elite international horseshow jumper, and she spent a substantial amount of time in the spotlight before suffering a severe burnout and setting out on a new path to help create the lives that people were dreaming of. Today, Cathy is a retired coach for highly sensitive people, a world-class expert and speaker on high sensitivity, and creator and host of the show Inside Scoop, where she interviews famous actors and performers on living the life in the spotlight, creating success, and finding happiness. I do want to ask you some questions about that, but we'll get there. So first, I want to say thank you. Thank you for coming and talking with me today.
I'm very much looking forward to it.
Before we get into any questions around some of the topics that we want to hit on, I think it would be great if you could kind of frame up for us what life looked like for a famous horseshow jumper. I think that's super interesting. And I also imagine it came with a lot of stress, a lot of pressure. What did that look like on, sort of the day to day, and how did that turning point come about for you that caused you to sort of leave that behind?
Well, to be honest, it was a rough time, but also a very fun time because my father was a horse dealer, but most of all, he had stallions and he was a breeder. So he knew a lot of people, he had a lot of connections, and he was thriving in the horse industry. And as a kid, we were growing up in between horses and animals. And to me, that was actually a big escape as well, because I always felt like I didn't really fit in, even though I always had a lot of friends and I was outgoing enough, but I had the impression like I didn't really belong anywhere. But when I was at his horse farm, I was at home, with the animals and just being with them and just spending time with them. That really gave me so much confidence, and it gave me a place to be myself freely without judgment. Because I think that because my father was and still is very successful in what he does, I think he put a lot of pressure on me as well, because he saw a lot of potential in me. And so I remember when I was 10 years old, I was doing one of my first show jumpings, and I was clear round, but then I had to do the last line. And instead of going from 9 to 10 in a straight line, I went from 9 to a whole other jump that I wasn't supposed to jump. So I had the wrong course. I did the wrong course, and my father was furious. And I will always remember that instead of just like creating a safe spot, he made it feel really unsafe for me, because he made me ride a higher class, not because I was ready, not because it was going well, but because I did something wrong. So it was almost like a punishment. And to be honest, that has been the course of my horse career. So I've always been under a lot of pressure. And even as a young child, when I was 14, I was riding international shows with my ponies, and I was doing a good job. But he always put a lot of pressure on me. So when I started thinking for myself or having my own opinion, or wanting to do it my way, then he would be really hard. And I was a lot of the times crying before I went in the ring. So something broke there. And coming from winning everything I was doing, at one point, something changed in my brain, and I made a shift, and I didn't even know how to ride a decent course anymore, because the survival brain kept taking over. And so I was freezing in the course, or taking too much action that wasn't in place. And that took almost 20 years. until I found a way to, reduce the stress. Because in very stressful situations, because of that education I had and that way I had to grow up, there was always so much pressure on performing that I can really block or freeze when I have to perform. So I have to find ways to create a new natural environment for myself where it's safe to just be me and where that will be enough. Because I think that in essence, that is probably what it is about, that at some point you just feel like it's not enough anymore to do your best or to, or to have fun while doing something that should be fun. So I've always put a lot of pressure on myself. And for years, I tried to keep pleasing my father and I tried to look for his confirmation in every possible way. And of course, when we're that needy, our energy is not so attractive. And, people tend to move away from it and instead of what we're actually in need of, them to come closer. So at one point, I got completely burned out. And I think that probably because of all the stress I was giving myself and all the pressure I was putting on myself to keep proving something that didn't have to be proven. And then at one point, I had a turning point where, all my securities got taken away and I felt like I hit rock bottom. And at that point, it was my personal transformation point as well, but also for my career because I started re-educating myself, taking classes, courses, everything you can imagine on coaching and on being highly sensitive. So that was so interesting for me. And I never thought after horses that I would love anything as much as I did because that was from my childhood and 10 years in my professional career or longer, maybe 12. So I never thought I would find another passion and love that I would, care so much about. But then this just completely changed me because remember in my darkest moment that I told someone oh, like all people are bad. That's how hurt I felt. Like all people are bad. And that was the person's reaction to me saying that while I was in my burnout. It was like very confrontational. He's like, Cathy, what are you saying? And it scared me a little bit, like, oh my gosh, that is not okay, So I had created a little aversion for people, if that's the word. Just sometimes I just translate things and then hope that it's right. But it's so beautiful because I always related a lot more with horses or animals than people. And whilst I was training to become a coach and started coaching in my own business, I started really loving people. And I was really enjoying what I was doing and enjoying to see other people transform and find themselves as well and find their own strengths and love them for who they are instead of what they think they should be or how they want the world to perceive them. No, just, from that inner core, that part of your soul that really wants to come out, the diamond that wants to shine. And that is what I did for myself. And that is what I did for hundreds of other highly sensitive people. And then I grew into the part where my niche became artists because it's a little bit under taken care of because there's not really a lot of artists who know that they are highly sensitive of themselves. Well, actually, there's a very high percentage of them highly sensitive. So that was just really interesting for me to shine my light upon them as well and to let them know, you're not so strange. You don't have to feel so lost. This is actually really normal. And this is what we can do to support you in the overwhelm and the overstimulation, because they have to deal even more with those things than we already have to do. And it's already like the roughest time ever for us HSP to deal with all the input around us and all the overstimulation.
So you were talking about how you felt so comfortable with the animals and you could be yourself and feel like there was a no judgment zone. I've heard that often, and it's interesting to me that you hear a lot of times people sort of joking and they say, they don't like people, they like animals, right? There's a lot of memes out there, people say that. And I think it's interesting that it probably ties in as I think about some of the people that I know of that say things like that. There are people that are probably what you classify as highly sensitive people. And it's interesting. I hadn't really tied that together, but why do you think that is? Do you think it's because being with people, if you're highly sensitive, and I do want to go back to that and just sort of classify what that looks like so people understand, because that's not my core group of people, so they might not really be familiar with that term. So I want to touch on that. But I also wonder if it's the reason there's such a connection with animals versus people is because you're not having to take on all the emotion and all the stuff that other people are going through. Do you think that's what's going on there?
Yeah, exactly. That's probably a big part of it. And one of the important parts of being highly sensitive. So first of all, being an HSP or a highly sensitive person is a characteristic trait. It's not a disease. It's something that can feel very hard, but it's also a huge and tremendous blessing. Because yes, we can have physical overstimulation, for example. I'm very sensitive to noise. So when my daughter is screaming like crazy, I mean, that just fries my brain. It really hurts my brain. But I've worked with an actress and she had the same thing with smell. I mean, I smell good, but she said she was giving classes for people to speak in public. And she said, I could just smell their smell of fear. Their fear sweat is how we say it in Belgium, their fear sweat. So she could just smell that on people. She could not take the train or the bus or anything because she would just smell everything. She said it's awful. So I've given lectures and people said, oh, the light is so bright. And I mean, I didn't even notice that. So it's so interesting that even as an HSP, we're all very different. I, for example, also have on my skin a sensitivity. My lungs are sensitive. My colon, is that what it is? My bowels are sensitive. So it's really interesting to see how it all comes together in the body. And that is just one aspect. You don't have to have a very high annoyance there, but the biggest part is how the brain works. Because a lot of the time people think like, oh, those are the crybabies, the sensitive people. And sometimes we are. We can be very sensitive, but it's actually a huge strength because our right hemisphere of the brain is stronger activated. So that means that all the qualities that lie there are enhanced, honestly. So that means that we've got a huge amount of empathy, which, like you say, taking over the emotions of others. Yes, with animals, there's just less baggage, less drama than with people. There's no negativity with animals because most of the times there is none. And there's also the creative aspect, like artists, the empathy and the creativity means that dancers, painters, actors, singers, DJs, songwriters, directors, all of them, they just feel it. Because our mirror neurons, meaning you see something, and your body makes you feel it, to say it very simple, are stronger activated than with non-HSP. So that means that when we see someone cry, we can really feel the emotion, we can lock it in. And that's not fun when you have to go to a funeral, trust me. But when you're an actor playing a part and you really want to characterize it, or when you're a singer and you really want to put the emotion in the song, there is no one else who can bring that to a higher level than the highly sensitive artist. That is why they are the best in the world. When you want to pitch a sale, you can trust on it that these are the people bringing it on. because they feel what the audience wants. The nurses, they feel what their client needs. It's such a blessing, but it also means that we can take on a lot of other people's emotions. It means that we will go over our own boundaries to keep pleasing other people because we want to keep everyone happy. Those are a few of the downsides. And it's been proven we have a deeper way of processing information, which is super interesting. And it's also a big shit pile every once in a while because you keep going over and over and over of things, and then it's really hard to let go. So that's a little bit, in a very small nutshell, what it means to be highly sensitive. And I think, yes, that you're absolutely right. Animals show up, they don't have an opinion about you, they just like you or they don't. And that is something that has to do with our energy. So they like you or they don't. And they, they have no baggage to put on you, because that is sometimes how it can feel, like people are bringing you down with their negativity. It's not really how it works, but okay, it can feel that way. Animals don't have that. There's just being. So yeah, it's very pure, and we are very, very sensitive to pureness.
So you alluded to it, but you didn't really quite go there. But one of the things that I know you teach or you work with people on is how to avoid taking on other people's emotions. So what are some tips for that? Because I do think a lot of folks that in this group and that listen, especially with, children, grown children, whatever, but other people too in the family, we do sometimes tend to carry the baggage or carry the emotions of what other people are going through. So what do you teach around that?
That is a big question, a really good one as well. To be honest, this is probably one of the things that I train the hardest on with the client. We work together for 6 months. So that means it's like teaching them a new sport. Like when you have to learn how to shoot hoops, that is how you will learn how to retrain your brain. So I will give you the concept of what I teach them, because it's actually really easy to do and really hard to stick to it. So everyone can do this, but I call it parking your thoughts. And it's about not engaging in them, because sometimes we tell ourselves that, we have to believe everything that we think. And so we give a lot of power and value to it. But very often, in my case anyway, a lot of my thoughts just kept coming back and back and back. And the more I engaged with them, the bigger and the more real they became, the more they were becoming my present reality. And especially when it comes to things that hurt the heart, those are the things that are attached with a lot of emotion, and they will keep coming back because the subconscious will recall them and bring them back in your thoughts. So if you want to make it heavier, then let's engage, let's keep talking to that little voice in your head and it will become more real. But I would suggest that you do that with the positive things. Just enforce those thoughts. It's like feeding a wolf. You've got two wolves. You've got the wolf of fear and you've got the wolf of trust. The thoughts are the same thing. The more you feed the wolf, the stronger it will become. And if you stop feeding the wolf, eventually, slowly, it will become very weak. At one point, it might die. And that is what we want for those thoughts. So it's not like you have to force them away or it's something negative or it can be there, because that would make them wrong. It would make them, you would give it even more heaviness. So it's interesting to not judge your thoughts. I think that first step is notice the thought. Notice what you're thinking. Be aware. And then when you're conscious about it, you ask yourself the question, is this thought serving me? Yes or no? If yes, on continue. If no, I park it like a car. And I tell myself, not this. No, not this. I'm not engaging in it. It's okay that it's there. No judgment. There is no space for judgment when it comes to the thoughts about yourself, because that will bring your entire energy down and you'll go into the rabbit hole again. So stop judging yourself. Stop allowing the negative self-talk. That is so important, because this is all step one. If you can't even do that when it comes to your own thoughts, you definitely can't when it comes to what you think other people are thinking about you or saying to you. But very often, what we do, because of the deeper way of processing information, and especially because we sense people very well, we tend to fill it in for them. We tend to put meaning to their words that they might not have said, and we make it heavier and bigger than it has to be sometimes, because of the deeper processing, we keep thinking it over and over and over again, because we really want to do good for others. And that is where the danger lies. One thing that is very interesting is ask the person, is this what I heard? Is that correct? Is that what you mean? First of all, start with doing that more. I think this is what I understood. Is that correct? I don't want to fill it in myself. I just want to make sure that I got it right. Start with doing that more. If you feel like you're threatened, speak that language first. That way, first of all, they'll hear what they just said, and it scares the shit out of them if it's confrontational. So that is a lot more powerful than engaging and going into it. And it gives yourself the time to breathe in between, so that it creates a little bit more space. You're not going too deep into the emotion because you've created a bit of space already. And then when they say yes, for example, and it's something hurtful, take deep breaths, because it's very important for your brain to come into balance again. And there are simple exercises that you can find on YouTube and everywhere you want. And one that I teach my clients is the heart coherence. It's a scientifically proven exercise, and it brings the hemispheres of your brain into balance. So by simply breathing in and out through the nose, and you breathe in for 5 seconds deep into your stomach, and you breathe out for 5 seconds, and you do that for 3 minutes every morning. Your brain will make you, do it in the evening. Make yourself a priority. Don't tolerate bullshit. Do it in the morning. This is for you. 3 minutes. If you haven't got those, you're doing something wrong. So start by just doing that, because you're training your brain. And that is what this is all about, training the brain. Because then you can have a little bit more control over those mirror neurons that are so powerful and that can really affect your emotions. So when you're training your brain to come into balance, the rational side of the brain can become stronger again when actually the emotions want to take over. So during the day, when you feel like, oh shit, my partner just came in the house and he's very stressed, and I feel like it's, I'm taking it over, just do the breath work for a few seconds, like 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, just a few times through the nose. And you'll notice that you are grounding yourself by doing that. You are coming back to yourself. You are connecting with your own energy by doing that. You are disconnecting the thoughts in your brain that might already go 100 kilometers per hour because they're racing because someone is coming in and there's a shit energy. That's how our brain can go then. So we're just centering, we're calm, the rational side goes, it comes into balance, and you can react with a lot more inner peace. You don't have to succumb to the emotions that come your way. I remember that when my partner came home from work and he had a rough day, and he would be complaining, and it would come into my chest or into my stomach, and I would feel it, and it would start burning, and I would spit it back out, and we had fireworks all evening long. So at one point, I started doing this exercise every morning because that's the training for your brain. So then when I had a speaking engagement or a difficult conversation with my husband, or he came home in that way, I would just go for a few seconds doing a little bit of breathing. Boop, I would calm down, I would center, and I could just leave his emotion be. I could just leave it be. It created a lot of space for him to just ventilate a little bit afterward. And it was out of his system. It didn't touch mine. And we both had a lovely evening. That's the big difference.
A lot more controlled and a lot less emotionally led. So that's important.
That's a big one.
So I want to switch gears for a minute and talk about when you were telling the story about your dad, I was thinking about all that pressure that was put on you. And I can see how that would lead into this feeling by a young lady, later to be a young adult, of needing to always be perfect, which we know doesn't exist. There is no perfect. But many of us would say that we are self-proclaimed perfectionists, always in the past having tried to reach perfection, never really getting there, but always on that hamster wheel. So what is some of the work you do there in that space? Because I'm sure with working with, these professional actresses and actors and performers, and they're all sort of fighting, for lack of a better word, for these parts and for being the best of, being on top of their game all the time. So what kind of advice do you give to them, to us, to anyone around letting that go and just knowing we're enough?
That's the core question, because it is about, first of all, doing the work so that you start to feel that you are enough. And what I've noticed with my clients, that when they start doing this inner work and these exercises, like a few that I've given here already, so they start implementing that day to day. It's not like, oh, I go and do yoga once a week. That will not change your life. That's fun for an evening. It's good for your body. Yet, I want to make a more profound change in people's life. I want to help them transform. So it's doing the work every day. And they train themselves. And that's the advantage when you work with professionals, that, they are very committed. So they do the work. And what we talk about are things like parking the opinions of others. For example, when they have to do an audition in front of the casting crew, that's a very stressful moment for a lot of actors. And that is when they want to be very perfectionistic. And it's also the moment when they start to get it, into their heads, because they keep thinking like, oh, that person is looking a little bit funny. Oh, that person must be thinking I'm doing something wrong. Oh, what is it actually they want? And instead of like embodying the role and enjoying the moment and really feeling the character that they're playing, they're stuck into their heads because they want to do such a good job. So it's a combination of training the parking of the thoughts and of the judgments to centering. Those are the two exercises we've already discussed. And then the third thing is to raise their energy, to raise their vibration. It's about stepping into the moment, claiming their shine, owning it, and especially enjoying it, bringing the focus to the fun part of the job instead of it has to be perfect.
That's interesting that you said that and brought us back there, because again, when you were telling your story, I was thinking when you said there was this moment of disconnect where you then couldn't get anything right, my first thought immediately was all that pressure your dad put on you, that took the fun out of it. You had something you really loved and could relate to and probably came very naturally. I'm sure you worked, but you know what I mean? It probably came very naturally. But then when it became this thing that you had to achieve, I imagine that's the point where the disconnect happened, where the fun left, and now you were just sort of going through the motions, doing what you had to do. So that's really great advice for people to try to bring the fun back to what it is they enjoy. I think people lose that.
I did, for sure. I did. And you can continue for a while without the fun because the passion is still there. So you do enjoy it still. but that's just a whole different level of performing. And when you can disconnect with, I have to be good and I have to prove myself, and you can just center and you can start from you again and not from what you think other people expect from you, but from you. Who am I? Who do I want to be? And how do I want to show up? How do I want to play this role instead of what do I think and blah, blah, blah? No, just be in the moment and have fun. We are here on this planet to enjoy ourselves. And sometimes, due to circumstances, we forget that. But that is where all the power lies. All the magic is in the fun.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. And I think, what I've found to be true in my own transformation and some of the other people that I've seen and talked to, there's typically this moment where we have this awakening, I'll call it, where something happens, it makes us reevaluate life, where we are, what's going on, so, whether it's good or bad, some kind of event or something. And that's the time where we get a chance to sort of look back and say, like, where am I? What's become of me? Who am I? And oftentimes we realize in that moment, in that time of reflection, that we've lost the fun. The things we love, we no longer even do, or we're doing them for the wrong reasons, right? We're looking for the external factors to make us happy. And I think that's the moment, hopefully, once we sort of pull the shade up and we see, then we can start taking back our life and really adding the fun things back in and really giving ourselves that passion we lost and letting the creativity, whatever that looks like for you, it just starts to shine. And I feel like you start to bloom into a whole different person. So it's a really neat time, I think, watching people go through that. So I wasn't going to get into this too much, but I think you kind of just touched on it. You're writing a book and it's around this claim your shine and own it framework that you used with your clients. Yes.
Yes.
So I imagine what we've been just talking about is sort of some of the stuff that you'll be putting in that book. Is that what you're working on?
Yeah, exactly. That's part of the book. Actually, like I said, I've coached hundreds of highly sensitive people, artists all around the world. And I just think that it's time that we start to share that wisdom with everyone. Of course, I can't spend my time working individually with everyone because I have to do some self-care as well. So that's the reason I thought, like, if I could have read a book like this when I was a lot younger and when I didn't have all these tools yet, I mean, my life could have been so different. First of all, I would have known there's nothing wrong with me to begin with, because I have thought that for a very long time. I felt like a misfit, even though, like I said, I've always been very social, but I always felt like the misfit in the group. And I noticed that a lot of the people I work with experience the same. And it's a little bit of coming home. There will be experiences from clients I've worked with so that you can see situations with other people. It gives so much recognition, but there will be concrete tools, concrete exercises, strategies, tactics that I literally use my clients. Everything that I have taught them, even the highest clients I've worked with, everything I've taught them will be in the book. I mean, so it's like the entire coaching journey is going to be in the book. And the name of the book, still a little secret, but I will share it with you. It's called Spotlight Stress. It will be specifically for us highly sensitive people who feel the need to perform and to overachieve and to always put a lot of pressure on ourselves. It's going to be amazing, and I'm so excited about it.
When is it coming out?
That's a good question. I think I'm halfway through. So there's still a little bit of work to do. So it's hard for me to put like a concrete date on it.
That's okay. Maybe we can come back and revisit it when you release it.
Yeah.
So before we go, just something, I want to end with something a little bit fun, maybe fun. I don't know. So again, you're working with these folks that some of the names people would recognize. They're on popular shows and all that kind of stuff. My question is really, what surprises you the most in this group of people that you're working with? Like, what has surprised you the most?
How insecure they are.
Oh, that's a good one.
And how they feel. I mean, I've worked with beautiful people inside and out, like that you think like I've worked with here in Belgium, Miss Belgium. I've worked with actors that, I always have to do like wipe my mouth a little bit before we, start talking because they're so handsome. No, I've worked with such amazing people. I've worked with people who have already such an amazing career behind them, and still they feel like they aren't good enough. They aren't successful enough. They haven't proven themselves enough yet. They still feel like they're not good enough. And that just amazes me every time.
I hate that that's happening to them, but I love that that's your observation, because I think it's so relatable and it reinforces that the negative self-talk is so prominent in everybody. It doesn't even matter. Like, you can be, to your point, super uber successful and gorgeous and whatever, and on paper look like you have it all together. And yet in your head, you're fighting those same demons that we're all fighting. Everybody's got it. Everybody has to learn how to manage those voices that we somehow got enlarged in there from what we picked up along the way, and find ourselves, put our own opinions at the forefront instead of everybody else's.
Yeah, and that's where I've noticed that we're all the same.
We're all the same.
And it does not matter who is in front of you. We're all the same. It's just, don't judge others and don't allow judgment towards yourself either. And especially not from yourself, because that is just bullshit that you cannot tolerate, because it's not because the voice is talking about it in your mind that it's true. So don't let it.
I love that. I have a friend, Marie, and she always says we're all the same. There was several of us that have been on a weight loss journey. And, a lot of these concepts apply, whether it's weight loss or you're trying to just, whatever it is, whatever your goals are, you can sort of have all the same frame of reference and need to do this mindset work. And she always says we're all the same because the patterns are the same. The stuff we think, the battles we're going through in our heads, the kind of cha-cha dance of 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, everybody's the same. It just happens the same way.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this has been fantastic. I appreciate the time we spent together. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I had a great time.
We'll put all your links and all the information in the show notes so people can check you out, check out your work, check out your show, and hear some interesting conversations there. And we'll be keeping an eye out for your book. You'll have to let me know when that drops and I can let the group know. Thank you so much.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review, as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.